Hey, welcome everyone. We are here to discuss about different behaviors of different card types with PSD2. I'll be sharing my real-time experience on how different card types behave when I enable PSD2 with my team. I will be trying my best to help all those who are closely working with PSD2, either on the merchant side or on the payment gateway side. And I will try to give as much insight with different approaches and different scenarios that would help them to troubleshoot and understand what results to be expected. I will be sharing my experience where I struggled on why this card is behaving in a different way as compared to some other card in the same scenario with the same inputs. This information was hard for me to find out because it was not available anywhere online. Um, until and unless I dive deep into and researched well over certain topics, and I had to find out rules related to the regulations and rules related to particular um, card issuers, which were actually found out to be a little bit different in every scenario because they have their own set of rules to provide the securities, keeping intact the SCA. Uh, Also, as a token of thanks, I try my best to include some special tips related to all the topics. So keep watching till the end. You might find different, lots of information about PSD2, and you will find lots of attractive graphs with impressive flow charts everywhere on YouTube or maybe on Google. But believe me, what I'm going to share here is what people really need to implement these as a software developer or as a manager or as a business analyst or as a compliance team. They need to know these things, why how each issuer behaves, because nobody informs you. um, so let's see what I've got for you here. I hope I'll try my best to help you out if in case you are facing any issues. So here are the different card types which I actually worked on. And well, I was working with a Fortune 400 client, which was working for more than 30 plus EMEA and APAC region countries. And we had a wide variety of customers using different card types and uh, with different currencies. So currency conversion was one of the concern. So enabling these cards in PSD2, keeping SCA intact and with different issuers was a big challenge for us. So let's start. The very first card is the basic credit card, which we all hold. It might be a Visa card, MasterCard, MaestroCard, MX card, etc. It's a long list. And yes, these cards need SCA from January 2021. You might start seeing, in fact, definitely you will start seeing declines if any one of the layer is not 3DS enabled. It can be either an issue from the card holder side, is not if the card is not 3DS enabled, or from the merchant side if they have not implemented 3DS, or from the issuer. Most issuers are actually up to date and they have already implemented uh, the major issuers, so they are not a concern. And then the payment gateways which you are using should be 3DS enabled. They should have implemented 3DS. Else, from January 2021, as I said, you might see a lot of declines in the transactions that would result into a downfall of the business. So we'll look into detail how these basic credit cards are supposed to behave in different scenarios. Then there comes a foreign card. What actually these foreign cards are? These are cards which are issued outside the EMEA region and the merchant exists in the EMEA region, or vice versa. So either the card issuer or the merchant, one of these are outside the region. So they are foreign to each other. The transaction is happening in some other country and the card belongs to some other country. They can be multi-currency or not, depending on what the card holder has applied for the card. So you are actually doing the transaction in a foreign currency or a foreign country if the currency is same. So these cards are actually out of scope of SCA. That does not mean that it will not work with under if 3ds is enabled for at every layer, but these cards don't need a security SCA mandate, and they work without going through that flow. And for sure, the merchants and the payment gateway don't have to worry about these. They will be handled by the issuer. Then there comes virtual card. What are these virtual cards? How they are different? They are also again the same as Visa card, Mastercard, maybe of any other brand. Most of the issuers usually offer the virtual card facility to the card holders, and people usually these days, out due to security, uh, prefer having virtual cards, apply for a virtual card. What these are not like the physical cards, the plastic cards. These are not the plastic physical cards which you can hold in hand. These are just virtual card numbers which look exactly similar to a credit card, and you won't be able to identify if it's a virtual card number or a basic credit card physical card. So it looks exactly the same, but it's just online. It's an e-card. It's just like a gift card, which is an e-gift card. Virtual cards are e-credit cards, and these are actually linked with the bank accounts. And while we apply for those virtual cards, the amount is loaded in these cards. These may be one time or recurring depending upon how what options the users select while applying for this virtual card. So just in case if you make a payment through the virtual cards, the remaining amount, if it's a one time, the remaining amount turns back into the bank account to which this virtual card number was linked. So these virtual cards are then discarded. So while we make the transaction, we are actually not exposing the real credit card number. So these cards are considered to be pretty safe, and that's the reason SCA says that these cards don't need to follow the SCA compliance policies, and they are out of scope and they can work without any 3ds mandate. Then there are corporate cards. These are again can be of any brand, but these are issued under the name of the corporation. The card holder name, the card holder does not hold it under his name, his or her name. So they exist under the name of the corporation. So the merchant says, when a transaction is done, merchant says that yes, it is our card. It's the amount will be deducted from the corporate account, and we don't need the customer, the card holder, to authenticate and to pass through SCA, because merchant is accepting that it's our card and it's okay, we are allowing them to do the transaction. But while doing this, it does not handles automatically. So merchants and the payment gateway has to handle this on their end, that yes, it's a corporate card and please do not apply the SCA mandate. So these cards are supposed to be exempt from SCA, but that exemption happens only when the merchant and the payment gateway initiates for this process by applying some exemption flags, which is altogether a separate topic. I might create a new separate video over exemptions, how to handle them, how that works. So let's dive deep into these cards individually, how they work. Yeah, so here comes the basic credit cards. As I said, they can be MasterCard, Visa card, MasterCard, MX card, or maybe any brand depending on your merchant, what the merchant is allowing on their website. Then any single one-time payment transaction happening should go through a challenge flow, which is a challenge to the end user, the card holder, the customer, and they will be seeing an OTP one time password screen where they will be inputting a one time password which is generated automatically and is different for every transaction. So usually for a one time transaction these cards are supposed to go through a challenge flow and we expect an OTP screen, and this is not a static password or a pin. It is generated randomly by the issuing bank on the medium whatever is selected by the card holder, maybe a mobile phone or an app, whatever the card holder is comfortable with. But there are certain exceptions. Sometimes the card holder may not see an ODP screen. That totally depends on the issuer. If issuer has a previous history with this particular card number, if issuer receives ample amount of information during the SOAP call while the merchant sends it to the issuer for authentication, if issuer feels that it's a safe and secure transaction, they have got enough information about the card holder, the address, the NAPNAS fields, then the issuer might not show a challenge flow. So don't be surprised if you are receiving the challenge OTP screen and then you are suddenly leading to a final without an OTP screen. But by default, OTP is expected. There are certain exemptions which can be applied for these cards that can be done uh, either at the issuer end, as I said, when the issuer feels that yes, it's a safe transaction, it's a low amount transaction, it cannot show you the OTP screen. There are certain exemptions which can be applied from the merchant side. That can be done through applying flags that would not obey the the challenge flow, that may go to the 3DS1 flow or a frictionless flow or maybe even out of 3DS. Then here comes the thing that when exemptions are applied, then the merchant is applying for the exemption, that we say that this card transaction is actually safe. So the merchant is taking the responsibility and saying proceed with the transaction anyhow. So if any fraudulent happens, that would be charged back to the merchant because the liability would lie in the hands of the merchant since the merchant has applied for exemption. So liability shift for 3DS2 in that case, when exemptions are applied, liability shift to the issuer will not happen. So for all this, there are certain minimum requirements that each and every layer is 3DS2 enabled. The acquirer should be 3DS2 enabled, the card issuer should be 3DS2 enabled, merchant where the transaction is happening should be 3DS2 enabled, and the card itself should be 3DS2 enabled. How the card gets 3DS2 enabled, each one has to take their own responsibility. So card holder has to take the responsibility of getting the card 3DS2 enabled by calling its concerned card issuer, the bank. Most of the issuers are doing the 3DS card enabling for all the bins available with them by themselves since it's a mandate. But but still it should be the responsibility of the card holder to check if their card is 3DS2 enabled or not. They should call their bank, and merchants should motivate their card holders to do this process, to do this added step, in order to not get bothered or getting their transactions declined and getting confused why I'm not able to buy the product, which why my card is getting declined, what happened to my card, what's the reason, because we cannot expect every um, a common man to know all these things about PSD2, the SCA compliance, 3DS2 or not. So it should be the duty of a merchant to inform their users, their distributors, depending on what your business type is, to enable their cards. Then comes the foreign cards. Foreign cards, as I said, may be issued in one country and you are making the transaction in some other country. So either the merchant or the card issuer is outside the EMEA region. So that is typically the technical term we use for this is one-legged transaction. We say that it was a one-leg transaction because one of them, merchant or the issuer, was existing outside the EMEA region. So since it's a one leg transaction, it lies out of the scope of PSD2 because PSD2 says that both merchant as well as the card issuer should be in the EMEA region to follow PSD2 guidelines. So since they are out of scope, there comes a lot of scenarios related to currency conversion, because if one the uh, card issuer has issued the card in one currency and you are doing transaction in another currency conversion is allowed or not. There will be surcharges, there will be conversion rates, so many things are there. So PSG2 says that you don't have to worry about it, you don't have to follow the SCA compliance in certain scenarios. They lie out of scope. So we should not, since they lie out of scope, we should not expect any challenge. Issuer should not show an OTP screen to the card user, and they go through normally. They just do the transaction and they get the response whether the card transaction is accepted or approved or declined. But as I say, that it's always the issuer who has the upper hand, because at the end issuer will be allowing or denying the transaction. We have certain exceptions. Every issuer has his own set of rules, including the SCA, to provide the security policies. They provide their secured cards in a different way, and that's how they brand themselves. So they say that they claim that they provide more security to the users. So they have their own business tactics to handle those security policies. I have a very real life example, like Bank of America. We used a foreign card of Bank of America. It still led us to a challenge flow, even though some other issuer did not lead us to the challenge flow. So it's all up to the issuer. If they want to still offer, if they still feel that it's a risky transaction, they might show you an OTP screen. But as a generic, you should not be going through the 3DS flow. You should be going through a non 3DS flow, that you make the transaction, get the response. Now since it's out of scope of 3DS, so there is no exemptions that can be applied. It is not applicable. 3DS2 is not applicable. Liability shift from merchant or card holder to issuer will not happen, because 3DS2 is not there, which liability shift was one of the biggest gift from the SCA uh, to put the liability shift. It was a kind of an attraction for them to uh, do a lot of changes in their rules, and this was an added advantage given to the merchants, that the liability shift will happen to the issuer, so that they enable their merchants do the implementation for 3DS2. So since it is out of scope, that benefit will not be there. Now we have some questions usually asked, that we are having issues with foreign card transactions with 3DS2. Even though they are out of scope, the thing is, will it work with 3DS2? Yes, if everything is enabled on 3DS2, you can still use foreign cards, they will work. But still, if you are facing an issue that all is going well but foreign cards are not working on 3DS2, watch this show till the end. You will get the answers in the tips section. Next question is, do merchants identify these cards? The answer is no. Merchants cannot identify if a card is a foreign card. They will be belonging to any of the brands, but there is no regex or there is nothing that a, there is no code which a C# developer or any developer can apply to identify that this card is a foreign card. This thing is only identified by the issuer. Only issuer has the capability to identify that the card is a foreign card. So that's the reason they are out of scope, because merchants and the payment gateway neither can do anything. They cannot identify these cards. They just process what they receive from the issuer and they don't have to worry about it. Issuers will handle it. Merchants and payment gateway don't have to worry. Then comes the virtual card. These are considered to be more secure. Since they are not the physical cards, they are the virtual card numbers which look alike like a physical card, and merchants plus payment gateways cannot identify it that it's a virtual card, it's not a plastic physical card. So they are considered to be out of scope because SCA says that while doing the transaction, the there won't be entering the real credit card numbers. These would be virtual numbers which cannot, which are just preloaded with some amount of money and might mostly they are one time and will get destroyed. So nobody can next time come and reuse this number, and it cannot be there is no fraudulent that can lead to it. So they say that we will not offer any challenge. There won't be any OTP screen the user will be seeing. There won't be any exemptions that can be applied. 3DS2 is not needed. Liability shift will definitely not happen since 3DS2 is not applicable. But still, I say that some issuers still stress, do some added work, and still say that whatever the card is, we will offer the challenge flow. Well, one thing I would like to add here is merchants can always offer their choice if they want the card holder to face the challenge flow for every transaction or not, or they don't want it, or they don't care. They say that they let the issuer decide. There are different flag settings which merchant can send with every transaction, but it is up to the issuer what they decide. Next is the corporate card. These are the cards which are not under the name of the card holder. These are under the name of the corporation, the merchants, and they are said to be exempt from SCA. Merchants and the payment gateway have to handle these cards. For the exemption, they have to apply, they have to make a setting, send a flag while making the transaction during the SOAP call with every transaction, and say that we apply for exemption, and the category of the exemption which we choose is the corporate card, that it's a card which is being issued by the corporate. The amount will be deducted from the merchant's account, and we allow it that it's a corporate card. We allow it that please exempt it from the SCA, because it is not the responsibility of the card holder, because it's a corporate card, not the card holder under the card holder's name, and it is not the responsibility to authorize to to follow the OTP flow, since it is not under his name. So why to offer a challenge and frustrate the end user? So we say that you please proceed. Merchants say that you please proceed. I will not make you do an added step of entering the PIN and all. You can do the transaction smoothly. I will handle it, take care of it, and I will take the responsibility. In case of any fraudulent, it will be my responsibility because I say that you should exempt this. But will the exemption be accepted by the issuer? That depends on the issuer. Exemption might be accepted, exemption might get rejected, and still the issuer might either offer a challenge or would say that it's declined. So the things are really random and it depends from card to card holder, from scenario to scenario, from business to business, from transaction to transaction. It's a uh, pretty surprising thing that there is no set rule because it depends on various layers, various there are a lot of dependencies. So every transaction can be considered as showing an strange or unexpected results as compared to other transaction. I know it's kind of tough, but slowly as we all will come on the same level, then things will stabilize. Maybe by the end of 2021, we expect more stabilized and a perfect set of rules when all the rules are updated and everyone is at the same page. We might expect that everything goes smooth. And the last thing is that liability shift will not happen because liability lies in the hand of the merchant, as merchant is saying that we want it to be exempted. Now here is the special tips which everyone was waiting for. The first few special tips for the MaestroCard. MaestroCards is another brand of MasterCard. MasterCards are credit cards, but MaestroCards are actually the debit cards part of the MasterCard. So mostly MasterCard have applied the same rules on the MaestroCards, but yeah, slight differences. For those merchants who were working with the MaestroCards and their transactions were getting approved, they might be seeing some declines. So be aware that MaestroCards have stopped working on non 3DS. MaestroCards strictly need 3DS enabled. If one of the layer is not 3DS enabled, transaction will get declined. Don't be surprised why my MasterCard is working fine without 3DS and MasterCard is not working. MasterCards are all up to date and they have been changed strictly to non 3DS while other brands are still allowing at least till the end of December. And these MasterCards are slowly will be replaced by some other alternate card types and they might even stop working. So don't be surprised if, especially if you are allowing MasterCards on your merchant site, be prepared for this change. Be prepared that your end users are aware of this change and you do not lose your business because end users were holding MasterCards and they were using it. Then the next tip is virtual or foreign cards. If 3DS2 is enabled and you are getting a lot of complaints from the end users that we are using a virtual card or a foreign card and my transaction is getting declined all of a sudden, which used to happen before. Or maybe this, if it's a foreign card, it is working in the EMEA region section, and if they are trying in some other locale which is outside the EMEA region, it is getting declined. It's because you can get it passed through only if you accept ECI 7 disability. Means that you merchants say that we disable ECI 7 and we take the liability on our side, that if something fraudulent happens, we will be responsible for any chargeback. So that is the only way to enable these cards over 3ds2 by accepting the liability and disabling this flag so that all the cards go through. In that case, these cards will go through non-3ds flow even if all the layers are 3ds2 enabled. So that's all for today. It was a big session, but I hope I might have given you lots of insight about what to expect, how to expect. I will be making another video over exemptions, what those exemptions are, when should a merchant go for an exemption, what are the ways we can apply for exemptions, how to set the exemptions, what is the best criteria so that we get a good success rate. Are exemptions always needed? Can exemptions cause some drawbacks? Is it right to apply for exemptions? And many more questions. So, do keep watching. Thank you, everyone.